All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's live cooking demonstration. My name is Ryan Smith. I'm the Wellness Program Administrator with Georgia State University's Employee Development and Wellness Services. Just a couple quick things before we get started. We are going to be recording today's session, so if you'd like to view it again or share it with a colleague who may not have been able to attend, we have all of our uploads on our EDWS YouTube page, so you can view past cooking demonstrations, yoga, guided meditation, and more. So we encourage you to check that out, and we'll be sure to provide a link to that page in a follow-up email. Throughout today's presentation, we are going to be making use of the WebEx chat feature. So if you've got questions, comments, anything related to the recipe, we'd love to hear your feedback, your ideas, or any questions that might need clarified. So use that WebEx chat feature. At the end of today's presentation, I'll be sure to address any questions that may pop up there. In terms of this recipe, we are going to need just a couple quick pieces of equipment. We're going to use a cutting board, a couple mixing bowls, a cooking sheet, and then we will be using the oven to make this. That's how we're going to roast a couple of our ingredients. So nothing too complicated, some basic stuff you should have in your kitchen. And one more thing I forgot to mention before we get started. As I said, I am the Wellness Program Administrator, but by trade, my career is that I am a registered dietitian. So whenever I select a recipe, I am on the lookout for recipes that are not only easy and convenient and great for meal prepping, but that are healthy and nutritious. We're looking for things that are packed with vitamins and minerals while being a little bit lower in terms of calories, so we can really get a lot of bang for our buck nutritionally. And today's recipe is certainly no exception. Today we're going to be making a kale salad with spiced tofu and chickpeas. Now, if you've been watching this program for the last couple of years, you may have seen this recipe before. We last made it, I think, a year or two ago, though it's one of my favorites, so I definitely like to bring it back into the mix, introduce it to new people, and then sometimes make little twists on it. But this is a really excellent recipe. And in the summer, as it's starting to warm up, I find that a nice, cool, crisp salad with some roasted protein ingredients on top just really hits the spot. So we'll be diving into that today. So we are working with tofu, and if you're new to it, don't worry about it. It's not that complicated. It's a little bit of a strange food at first, but I'll walk you through the basic steps. So whenever you buy tofu, it'll come in a little carton like this, and it's packed in liquid. And tofu by itself, it's made from soybeans. It doesn't really taste like much. But if we drain the liquid out of it, it almost acts like a sponge, and it's able to pick up all the different flavors of spices and sauces that we want to add to it. So it's sort of like a blank canvas for putting that flavor into. It's a great source of protein, which is why you see it in so many plant-based dishes. And we're going to be using it as our main source of protein today. But I mentioned we have to drain the liquid out. And to do that, we do something called pressing the tofu. Now, I'll break down what I've done here. I've gone ahead and pressed it ahead of time just to speed things up for the demonstration today. But your tofu will come in a big block. And I typically cut it into 3 thinner pieces. I then lay them out on a paper towel and then maybe a hand towel underneath it, put more paper towels on top and another hand towel. And then, as you saw, I had a heavy object on top. I'm just using some canned food here. And you leave it there and press it for anywhere from at least 10 minutes up to 30 minutes. The longer you press it, the more liquid you'll drain and the more flavor you'll be able to take in. So if you can be patient with it, it's a great way to make it even tastier. So as I mentioned, I've gone ahead and pressed it. And if you're new to tofu, like I mentioned, don't worry about it. We are going to provide the instructions on how to press the tofu inside of the recipe we'll be sending out at the end of today's demonstration. It is a new food. It can seem a little weird at first, but I promise it's very healthy, very versatile as well. So, give it a try, experiment with it, and you might be pleasantly surprised. So I'm just going to move these towels over to the side here, clear some of the view a little bit. So now that we've got the tofu pressed, we've pulled some of that liquid out of it, it's ready to pick up some of the flavors we want. We're going to cut it into 3/4 inch cubes. So curling my fingers like so, I want to protect the tips of my fingers. I'm just going to cut into the tofu, and then we'll turn it and make additional cuts to get those nice little cubes. Now, these don't have to be perfect, but try to get as close as you can to a uniform shape. That'll help them cook evenly when they're in the oven, so that one piece, if it's really small, it might cook faster. A big piece might take longer to cook, and you could get some unevenness there. But just do the best you can. And if you notice any really big pieces, you can always go back and make some additional cuts as needed. So that's really it. Like I said, if you haven't worked with it, it's kind of like a little sponge. It's a little squishy. We pulled some of that liquid out, but once we roast it in the oven, it's going to get nice and crispy and tasty. So go ahead and transfer your tofu into a medium-sized mixing bowl. You want the bowl to be big enough to fit a block of tofu as well as a can of chickpeas. Since this is a spiced tofu and chickpea recipe, we are going to be working with chickpeas, aka garbanzo beans. So chickpea and garbanzo bean means the same thing. I just purchased a low sodium can of it from Kroger, and I went ahead and rinsed and drained it to get some of that excess liquid off. And so now we've got that 15-ounce can of chickpeas, and we'll go ahead and add those in. Now let's pause here and talk about the nutrition we're working with so far. I mentioned tofu is made from soybeans. It is mostly protein, so it's a great way to add in that protein to support just healthy tissue and skin, nice muscle development as well. And the chickpeas are our other source of plant-based protein. They have a little bit of protein in it, as well as some healthy carbohydrates. They are high in fiber and have some good B vitamins in them as well. So by adding those in, we're enhancing the protein content, getting those healthy carbohydrates for nice sustained energy throughout the day. And the fiber content we get from them will help us in a number of different ways. But I'll hold off on talking about fiber for now because we've got a lot of other star ingredients in this recipe that have fiber in them as well. So let's set this to the side. We've got those in the bowl. And the next thing we're going to do is we are going to make what is going to be our dressing or our marinade. We're going to use it in two different places. We'll put it on top of the tofu and the chickpeas before they roast to bring out some of that flavor in the oven. And then we'll save half of it to put on top of the salad itself. So it's going to be a dressing and a marinade in that kind of way. So the first thing we're going to do is add a 1/4 cup of lemon juice to a medium-sized bowl. Now you can use fresh lemon juice if you want, though a 1/4 cup is a decent bit, so it may take a couple lemons. I just bought the bottled lemon juice. Doesn't taste quite as good, but it gets the job done, and it's convenient because we can store it in our fridge for a long period of time. Next, you'll want a 1/4 cup of lemon juice. Then we're going to do a 1/4 cup of olive oil. And we'll add that in. And that's sort of the basis of a lot of dressings is we use an acid or a vinegar, and then we add a healthy fat to it like olive oil. So we're doing that lemon juice for that acidic, tart flavor, and then adding the olive oil to give it that nice, fat, rich texture. We've got quite a few seasonings lined up here, so I'll walk you through them. This is going to be a tablespoon of paprika. This is going to get everything a nice, like reddish brown color. Really, I think enhances the visual appeal. And it adds some nice flavor as well. So a tablespoon of paprika. We are using regular paprika, not smoked paprika. If you have smoked paprika at home, I would recommend using about half the amount of what I just did. So a tablespoon of regular paprika, but smoked paprika is much stronger, much more potent. So I'd recommend only doing half a tablespoon if you happen to have that variety. If you do a full tablespoon of smoked paprika, you'll be okay. It's just you're gonna really taste it. It'll really hit. So then we'll do a tablespoon of ground cumin. We're going to do 2 teaspoons of, this is going to be just garlic powder, which adds a nice flavor to it. If you wanted to use fresh garlic in this, you could, but garlic powder is convenient since everything else is also a dried seasoning. 1 teaspoon of ground black pepper, and then 3/4 of a teaspoon of table salt. So you'll notice the salt amount is much lower than the other ones. We want to keep the overall sodium content at a healthy level. It's good for our heart health to keep that a little bit lower. Plus, we've got some salt naturally coming from some other ingredients, so we'll keep that a little bit lower, like I said. Then taking a whisk or a spoon, we're just going to mix this around until it's incorporated. You're really trying to get the lemon juice and the olive oil to blend together and make sure all the powdered seasoning is in contact with your liquid. You don't want any dry seasoning there so that those flavors can mix and mingle. It makes a really, really nice dressing or marinade. So once you've got that mixed, you can be exact with this if you really want to, but I'm just going to eyeball it. We've got the dressing there. We're going to take about half of it and pour it over our chickpea and tofu mixture. Okay. And then reserving the other half for later when we get to the salad, we'll set this to the side. And then go ahead and just stir these around. You'll see, so that tofu, when I showed it to you earlier, is that white color. As we mix it, you're going to see it take on the color of the sauce that we just added, which again, I think adds a lot of visual appeal. And this is really what tofu is good for. It's almost like a chameleon blending into the environment. It picks up the flavors, it picks up the colors and some of the visuals of the sauces you combine it with. So by itself, nothing spectacular, but when we add these seasonings, when we add these sauces, tofu becomes a super excellent and tasty food. So go ahead and just stir it around until all the pieces have come into contact with the sauce. It may group up at the bottom a little bit, so you can stir it around and make sure that you're getting those pieces. And you'll see the color start to shift. The tofu now looks more similar in color to the chickpeas, and you just kind of mix it until you don't see any white on the tofu. Next, what we're going to do is we'll get our baking sheet. Now I've gone ahead and preheated the oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. So you'll want to get it there. And we'll have our baking sheet. I'm going to use just a little bit of cooking spray real quick. And then we will spread the tofu and chickpea mixture out onto the baking sheet. And your goal here, I'm going to try to scoop up all the little pieces of sauce and tofu that I can because I want all that flavor in there. Your goal here is going to be to spread these out into as even of a layer as possible. If you've got a smaller baking sheet, just do the best you can. But if they're stacked on top of each other, the tofu won't be able to get quite as crispy or quite as nicely browned. So an even layer like that should be perfect. And then we will go ahead and set that on the middle rack in the oven, again at 450 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, when you're making this recipe, you'll want to keep it in there until it reaches a golden, crispy brown texture. You can try a little chickpea and see if it's gotten there, or just look at it visually. I find that this takes about 25 to 30 minutes, though your oven may vary slightly, so just check in on it every once in a while. For the sake of the demonstration today, we have already prepared a batch of it, so you won't have to wait 25 minutes for that to finish. But at home, that is the best thing to look for, that golden, crispy texture. And in just a little bit, I'll show you what that looks like with our finished batch. So I mentioned we had some other ingredients that we wanted to talk about today. So let's go ahead and start prepping the salad portion of this recipe. We're going to use a single bell pepper. I'm using an orange one, though red and yellow are excellent choices as well, whatever feels like a fun choice to you or whatever you may have on hand. Now for cutting a bell pepper, it's a very irregular shape. It tends to rock and roll around, which can make it a little difficult to cut into. So my goal with something like this is to simplify the shape of it when we cut into it to get nice, even pieces. So the first thing I'll do is I cut off the very top of the bell pepper, just like that. And then in a similar way, I'm going to turn it and cut off the bottom of the bell pepper. And what this does is it makes sort of this tube shape that we can see through. And usually your middle is connected by 3 to 4 little connection points. They're very easy to cut. You can just carefully take the knife and cut along those points. From there, you should be able to pull that piece out with no problem whatsoever. And what we've done now is we've hollowed out the bell pepper. It's a lot easier to work with. We're going to take a single cut right down the middle there. And just like that, we're able to flatten the bell pepper into a much, much easier shape for us to now chop it up. So take one of your flattened pieces, again, curling your fingertips to protect them, and just run your knife through it to get some vertical strips. And then I will turn it 90 degrees perpendicular, line those little guys back up, and cut again. That gets us a nice even dice. We'll repeat that process here. So vertical strips, turn 90 degrees, and then get those cuts going. Now for the top and bottom pieces, you can kind of just cut through them, trying to match the size of the other pieces to the best of your ability. I usually will do a similar process of cutting in one direction, turning, and then cutting again. And I find that works pretty well. For the top piece, you can be really, really delicate and carve around that stem if you want to, or you can just sort of cut off those large pieces and then chop them up individually. That's usually what I do. I'll remove that piece over to the side and then come back here. Okay. So we've got our bell pepper chopped up now. Now the bell pepper, great source of vitamin A and vitamin C, very good for our immune system, and it is a good source of fiber, which I mentioned we'd talk a little bit more about. And I'll talk about that as I dice up our English cucumber. We're going to use half of an English cucumber. They're very similar to a regular cucumber, though they don't have seeds in them. You can use a regular cucumber if you prefer. Flavor-wise, there's such a subtle difference that I can barely even tell. So whatever you have on hand will be great, but you'll use about half of one. And we're just going to cut this into slices, though if you prefer, you could chop it up further. So let's talk about fiber. You're going to find fiber in all fruits and vegetables. You're going to find it in our whole grains, so like brown rice and whole wheat pasta and whole wheat bread. You'll find it in beans and chickpeas, like I mentioned earlier. So fiber can help us keep a healthy blood sugar control, which is really great. It can help us maintain healthy cholesterol levels. It can help with weight maintenance because it tends to make us feel full and satisfied. So we don't have to eat as much food to feel like we've had a really filling and good meal. And finally, it's great for our digestive health. It keeps you regular and keeps everything moving through your system. So we cut these into the small slices. As I mentioned, if you want to, you could go back and cut them into half slices or even quarter slices. I'll go ahead and make them into the half slices, but you can decide what pieces you feel like will work best in your salad. That is totally personal preference. And speaking of personal preference, as we work on the salad portion of this, these vegetables are entirely flexible. If you want to put some tomatoes in this, you can. If you wanted to maybe roast some cauliflower or broccoli with the chickpeas and tofu, I think that'd be excellent. So any veggies you want when we're making a salad, make it your own. Just know that our overall goal is we have some vegetables coming into the mix. We've got some healthy carbohydrates from the chickpeas and then some protein from the tofu and the chickpeas together. And that combination of foods, carbohydrates, the protein, the vegetables, and then some healthy fats from places like the olive oil, that's sort of our overall goal when we make a balanced meal. Now, I'm going to make this salad in a giant plastic container. If you plan to serve it right away, you might just get a large salad bowl, but I know this is going to be leftovers for me. I already made a batch earlier, so we're going to put it in here, and it's nice for meal prepping because you can keep it in the fridge that way. Now, in terms of the base of your salad, we advertise the salad as a kale salad, but really you can use any greens you want. And in fact, today I happen to have a 50-50 blend here, which is spinach and spring mix, which I'm a big fan of. So I'm going to go ahead and just use that for the base of my salad. But feel free to use kale, spinach, romaine, whatever you happen to have on hand or whatever your favorite green is. It's going to be a healthy choice, and we can enjoy that. In terms of the amount, you're going to want about 5 cups of your greens. Now, a cup is roughly equal to the size of a balled up fist, so you can estimate it, or if you want to get a measuring cup out, you can use that as well. And I'll show you that side by side. You can see that those are pretty close in size. Your hand size may vary a bit. I'm just going to eyeball it since it is just a salad, and putting a little bit of extra green in there won't hurt. So we're going to throw in several handfuls of these greens to be the nice hearty base of this salad. Close that up. So we've got our salad base there. Then what we can do is we can go ahead and top it with the bell pepper. And then we'll top it with our English cucumber we chopped up as well. So very, very fresh ingredients going into this. As I mentioned, in the summer when it's hot, I love things like cucumbers that are super refreshing and feel like they help me cool off. They do have a lot of water content in them, so they can actually help you hydrate as well and meet your water needs. So that's a nice benefit. So we've got that in there. And what I usually will do with some of the salads we make on these programs is I'll keep the dressing separate. I recommend to people, oh yeah, keep the salad here, keep the dressing separate. That way the ingredients don't get soggy. This recipe is an exception to that. And the reason I say that is I find that this dressing tastes best when it's coated everything and it's actually been able to refrigerate for at least 2 hours. It sort of helps things marinate, pick up that flavor, and this salad definitely tastes best when it's nice and cold. So in the past when I've made this, what I do is I will roast my ingredients, I'll top them on top of the salad, add that dressing, and I just set it in the fridge to marinate for a couple hours. And then whenever I go to eat the leftovers, I enjoy them cool. If you want to do it with hot ingredients on top, you absolutely can, but I just find that the dressing works better whenever we give it some time in the fridge. So For that reason, I will go ahead and add our dressing directly to the salad. I'm just going to use a little spatula spoon here. I want to get as much of that flavor out as I can. And the dressing overall, to try to describe the flavor, it's got a fun little spice to it. I think the paprika and the cumin really contribute that, but you've got the garlic powder giving it, a slightly more complex flavor. And then, of course, the salt and pepper to just give it that good savory taste. So now I'll toss the salad around. The goal is just to get that dressing to combine with all of the different pieces of vegetables, all the different leaves. If you want to, instead of using a spoon or salad tongs, you can also, if you're going to do it in a meal prep container, put the lid on and kind of just jostle it around like that. That's another good way to coat all those ingredients. And then the final piece, I'll go ahead and grab this since I mentioned I pre-cooked this. These are the chickpeas and tofu pieces that we roasted. And what you'll notice is the tofu pieces almost blend in. They're no longer white. They're now like a really nice crispy brown, almost like a little piece of chicken they kind of look like. And they've got a firmness on the outside that's crispy, but then you bite into them and they're sort of juicy and tender in the inside. Really, really love roasted tofu like that. So let's go ahead and add this on top of the salad. And if you've never done roasted chickpeas before, it's probably my favorite way to eat chickpeas. They just are these crispy, little pockets of flavor. They're really, really tasty. Love the texture, and it's a nice bit of protein and fiber that we have in here. So we'll sort of mix that around. This gives our dried, crispy tofu and chickpea pieces a chance to pick up some of that liquid marinade. So they've already got some of the flavor on it, but now they're getting a little bit extra. And then what we'll do, just for presentation's sake, we'll go ahead and plate some of this so you can get an idea of what it might look like if you were serving it. I know I showed a picture at the beginning where everything was nicely laid out and it looked all pretty. So we'll see if we can imitate that. I'll try to get some tofu and chickpea pieces to put on top to make it really pop. I find the bell pepper does a good job of making it look really appetizing. So you'll get about 4 servings out of this recipe. Each serving is going to be about 380 calories. So that's a nice meal prep amount, especially if you're working on weight maintenance. If you're someone who's maybe a little larger or more active, you may need more calories than that. And you can always complement it with a piece of fruit or potentially serving a larger portion of it. Or even you could serve this over a little bit of brown rice and kind of make a bowl out of it. But there is our completed recipe. Hopefully you can see those bright orange bell peppers, the crispy chickpeas and tofu really popping off the greens there. I think that's just a really aesthetic and nice looking dish. So pretty straightforward to make. Most of the work is just getting that marinade in, roasting it in the oven for 25 minutes, and then throwing all those salad ingredients into a mix. Like I said, I make a big airtight container. It'll be good in the fridge for up to 4 days. So this is great if you want to meal prep on a Sunday and have your lunch for work Monday through Thursday. Very, very convenient, easy to take around with you. Just keep it in that fridge. And as I mentioned, my preference is to serve it cold and let that dressing stay refrigerated as all the flavors sort of soak up into the veggies. So that's really it for the recipe today. We are going to be sending out a copy of it along with a link to the recording. So keep an eye out in your email if you're curious about trying it at home, seeing what it's like. I always love to hear when people sort of remix it, maybe add their own ingredients, swap things out. If the tofu part makes you feel a little weirded out because you're not quite used to it, that is a-okay. As I mentioned, some of these pieces of tofu almost look like little chicken pieces. You could absolutely do some grilled chicken in place of the tofu on top of this salad, and I think that would be excellent. The dressing and the flavors of everything else would still work really, really well with the chicken. And that grilled chicken will bring in a nice lean protein. So if you want to add an animal protein to this, I think that would be a great substitute. And other mixes and matches, as I mentioned, swap out those vegetables, get some other good things in there. If you've made this recipe before, maybe you saw it when we did it a year or 2 ago, try new vegetables in there, try different sources of protein. We worked with chickpeas today, but obviously there are other things you could use, like other types of beans if you prefer. Really a lot of flexibility there. So again, keep an eye out in your email so we can send that information so you could try it at home. You'll also get a link to a short survey where you can let us know what you thought of today's presentation. We're always looking for feedback and ways to improve our program. So if you've got ideas for future recipes, other topics you'd like to see me talk about, we would love to hear it. And finally, we do programs like this at Georgia State all the time. Our office, Employee Development and Wellness Services, is always trying to do different wellness programs, and the cooking demonstrations happen twice a month alongside our other offerings. If you're not already on our mailing list, you can email us at edws@gsu.edu, and I'll be sure to put that in the chat here in just a moment. And you can get on that mailing list. Every Monday, we send out a weekly email of what we'll be doing so you can make sure you never miss one of our programs. I'm looking at the chat and I don't actually see any questions or comments that we didn't already answer through just kind of talking through the presentation right now. But I'll hang around for a little bit. So if you've got any questions, feel free to put them there. And let me type that email in there real quick. So that is the email that you can get on the mailing list at if you'd like. But otherwise, thank you everyone for your time today. We really appreciate you taking some time out of the day to join and make this recipe with me. I hope that you have a great rest of your day, and we hope to see you again at one of our programs soon. Thank you.